Hello, and thank you for joining today's webcast. We're about to begin Get Serious About Social ROI. I'm going to begin with a few points of housekeeping. By now, you should be in the event console. You should see the title slide for today's presentation, a Twitter stream, and a Q&A widget open. You can also tweet about this webcast during the presentation with the hashtag SeriousAboutSocial. Please also submit questions during the webcast through the Q&A widget. We'll be addressing those that we can get to at the end of the presentation. Please also note there are additional resources available to you at the bottom of your screen, including our speaker bios, a way to download today's deck, more on lithium and our products, and of course a way to contact us if you'd like to set up a meeting. Yes, this webcast will be recorded. It will be available on demand within several hours of this broadcast at the same URL. I'd like to now introduce today's speakers. With us, we have Joe Cothrell and Justin Schuster. For more than a decade, excuse me, I'm pushing some slides, having a few problems pushing slides. If I could get the moderator to do that, I'd like to go to the speaker slide. For more than a decade, Joe Cothrell has helped to both B2C and B2B companies plan, execute, and measure successful social strategies. His article, Measuring the Success of an Online Community, has been cited more than 90 times in business and academic journals. At Lithium, he helps curate our ROI models and frameworks that our consultants apply every day in their work with Lithium customers. We also have with us Justin Schuster. Justin's the Vice President of Product Marketing at Lithium and a passionate advocate for enterprise software that delivers real business value. His previous experience includes senior marketing product roles at Symantec, EMC, and Market Tools. Justin holds an MBA degree from UC Berkeley. Justin's going to kick off today's webcast as our first speaker. So with that, welcome to both Joe and Justin. Take it away, Justin.
Bonnie, thank you so much, and welcome to all of you who are joining us for today's webinar. I want to start out on our conversation about getting serious about social ROI. I want to start out by asking you to go with me on a quick visualization exercise. Imagine your customers today. Imagine them asking questions on Facebook and on Twitter and getting an answer from the brand in minutes. Imagine being that responsive. Imagine your customers typing questions into Google, going to that first place where everybody has that impulse to go get their questions answered, going to Google, going to their favorite search engine, typing in a question, and the first thing that they see in the result set is a link to a conversation that's on your website, and it's an answer that's been written by another one of your customers helping each other. Imagine being in charge of this initiative that is transforming the way that your business is engaging your customers and potentially impacting tens of thousands or millions of customers that you have for your business. And none of this is fantasy. This is all achievable today, but imagine pitching that vision to your CFO or to your VP of support or to your chief marketing officer, all of whom are focused on KPIs like earnings per share or EBITDA or operating margins or staffing costs or conversion rates or NPS or first call resolution rates or cost per incident. The language doesn't quite translate. And what we're going to help you with today is being able to put together a business case that's going to resonate with that type of audience. Many brands are struggling to measure ROI from social programs. Studies have been done about this. We recently teamed with the CMO Council, and they surveyed a group of senior marketers a year ago and found that nearly half were not able to measure the impact of social media investments. And this has become such a question out in the industry that many people have written articles asking, is it even possible? Is it okay not to measure ROI? Is measuring social ROI even a joke? But it's not. You absolutely can measure ROI, and in fact, you must. This is your path to personal success. To win mindshare from those senior executives, you're going to need a solid business case that's grounded in facts and precedent and evidence. And with this, you'll be able to secure investment for your vision. And with that investment, you'll be able to drive results that lead to personal success. The type of success that you can see represented by these customers who are listed here. These are top brands who have won awards using Lithium software in the last year. Awards from leading organizations like Forrester, like the Institute for Customer Service or like the Gartner CRM Excellence Awards. Each of these brands succeeded in part because the individuals in charge of the initiatives at their companies, in charge of these social programs, was able to put together an ROI-driven business case to secure investment and to prove to the business that what they were doing was having a material impact. And these material impacts are quite sizable. You're going to hear about very exciting numbers today as Joe takes you through examples of what's possible and how to frame a business case. To kick things off, let me just give you a quick overview of who Lithium is. And this is important because this will help you understand the particular lens and frame that we use to talk about social ROI today. We make software that powers the social customer experience, and we work with hundreds of leading brands around the world. Collectively, across the online communities that we build and power for companies, we get over 1 billion visits per year. We're a leader recognized by analysts. We've got a fantastic platform that runs in the cloud that's got fantastic SLAs for uptime. And what we're helping brands with is this notion, again, of social customer experience. We live in this age where customers are more connected and empowered, and they have more choices than ever before. There is more pressure on brands than ever before to deliver a great experience and to do that in the most visible places where customer engagement exists. Every interaction that you have with a customer on Twitter, on Facebook, on your website, in your communities is creating a record that's searchable, that's discoverable, that can be experienced by other people, and that shows just how much you care about your customer experience. And customers their expectations continue to rise because others in the industry are figuring out how to handle this. They're doing a great job. Customers now want, they expect a response the very same day when they are asking you questions on Twitter and Facebook. They increasingly prefer to research products online or to ask questions online before they try and engage your service teams in the contact center. And they know that they're in control. They know that they have more power than ever before, so they hold you accountable. They are highly likely to stop using your services if you give them one bad experience, and they are highly likely to go tell others about this bad experience, and they can do that in a second with a flick of their thumb without even giving it a moment's thought. So in this age where social customer experience is more important than ever, we help you with a single unified set of tools for being able to address the business needs around this. We help you engage on existing social networks like Twitter and Facebook and others to make sure that you're delivering a great experience on those channels. We help you create a content asset on your website where customers are building that asset and it's growing in value, it's growing in impact over time. The value of this trusted content helps people get to the information that they need to make smarter purchase decisions and to get their service needs met. And through this interaction with your customers, you can even co-create the next great products of the future. We help you scale your impact through solutions that address each aspect of the customer lifecycle, including customer care, the purchase process, and the point where brands are looking to invent the next generation of products and take them to market faster. And we help you infuse all of this into your platform, into your enterprise systems, into your the rest of your website, into your software applications if you're a software vendor. Underlying all of this is a rich layer of social intelligence that helps you understand the impact that you're having, measure and prove the ROI that you're generating, and understand where are the places where you can apply energy and how to have the greatest impact to increase customer engagement. So with that as background, let me turn things over to Joe Cothrell, who will take you through how to build a business case and various frameworks and customer examples that can get you there.
All right, thanks very much, Justin, and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. In my role as Chief Community Officer, one of the things I do is I support our sales organization, particularly when they're working with companies that haven't created a strategy for social and trying to figure out, gosh, where do we go with this? And I was reflecting in preparing for this webcast in a conversation we had with the company not long ago where the prospect said, first thing I want to tell you is you don't have to tell me that, ROI for this stuff is really not going to be possible, because she says, I already know that. I've already done some research, and so, I just want to let you know I'm already informed about the impossibility of doing ROI for this. And we were like, wait a minute, that is not what we believe. That is not what we believe. That is not what our customers believe, and it isn't really what you should believe. And I think and hope that through the examples that I walk you through here, you'll get a good sense of how companies are actually quantifying it today. I'm going to show you three things. I'm going to talk through major levers, major ways in which social creates value for organizations. I'm going to talk through the ranges that we see. What are the results that companies get, looking across hundreds of lithium customers and the examples that they've shared with us. And then I'm going to illustrate that with some stories about real companies. And we'll refer to this towards the end of the webcast as well, because we have a lot of resources. We have something called a success book that has some of the results that our customers have achieved in dollar value. We have our Lithia Awards, which are the annual awards we give. You'll see on our website that the submissions for Lithia Awards are full of quantitative results that our customers have achieved. A lot of these are still coming in for our annual customer conference. It's just I reviewed them as part of the preparation for this webcast. I'm just always amazed at what our customers are sharing about their approaches and real numbers, which are the things that can sometimes be hard to get. So we'll walk through those three things, and hopefully through the course of this you'll learn the major ways that people think about ROI for social. You'll learn what the results in general people are getting, and then you have some real specific data points associated with specific companies. All right, so let's talk about the three sources of social ROI. I always say there are only three reasons why any company ever does social. You're trying to sell something, you're trying to learn something, or you're trying to save something, really. You're trying to save money, and that might be in a support context, as Justin mentioned. You're trying to deliver support more efficiently or less expensively through social channels, or you're trying to use social as a channel for promoting sales or promoting loyalty in your customers so that they buy more and buy more often and remain customers longer. Or you're creating interactions in social, the product of which is insights that you glean that help you create better products, help you improve your processes, or give you information that you can act on that creates value for you as an organization. Those are the only three reasons. If you want to really simplify why people create social strategies, that's it, really. It's just those three reasons. So, understanding that there are three reasons why people create social, what are the sources of data? So when we turn to quantifying the results of social, well, there are really three different kinds of data that we need to do the kinds of ROI analysis that we're going to be talking about today. First, obviously, there's community and social data. So there's all the data that comes out of a social system, and it's registration data, and it's usage data, and it's about participation visits and all the rest of that stuff. Obviously, you need that, right? Because that helps you understand what's going on in the system, what people are doing, etc. But that alone won't get you ROI, and I'm often asked by customers, gosh, here are my page views. What's the dollar value of this? In order to get to a dollar value, you have to associate social data with something that has a dollar value, whether it's a transaction, whether it's a conversion event that has a dollar value for you, whether it's something that has a dollar value in terms of cost that you're reducing. So very often, what you also need in order to do ROI is some source of financial data. How much does this process cost us in support? How much does it cost us to support a customer in traditional channels? If you don't understand that it costs you $15 to answer a phone call, it's hard to understand the value you're creating because it only costs you 15 cents for a customer to get an answer out of the community. If you don't know what that difference is, it's hard to really determine what the savings you're generating every day by having people interact in your community. Finally, the third source of data for social ROI most typically is customer surveys. So I think you'll notice if you visit Lithium communities that it is not uncommon to have a survey delivered to you as you go through the experience of this community. And if you're interested in this, I might almost recommend that you visit several communities and refresh on that homepage. You can gather a lot of information about the kinds of surveys that people are creating, and I think it's a great learning experience if you're putting together your own survey process is to gather those examples. What do people gather in surveys? Well, they gather information on satisfaction, right? You had an experience in our social channels. Were you satisfied with that? Obviously customers are doing satisfaction broadly with the brand, NPS, etc. So this is part of a range of research that our customers do to really understand where do we stand with our customers relative to their satisfaction with our products and services. But for most of our customers, they're also in their surveys probing success. So you participated in our social channel. Were you successful? Did you get the answer that you needed today? You learn a little bit of that in the features that exist in the platform today. For example, it is typical in our customer implementations that you can actually mark an answer to a question as the solution if you've asked a question in the community. But because there's so much passive use in the community, because there's so many people who are coming and not ever asking a question, just gaining an answer and leaving, a survey gives you a great way to actually get a window into the vast number of people who arrive, get an answer immediately, and then leave. And finally, another common thing that people are looking for in the customer survey is effort. How hard was it for you to get an answer in this social channel? And it's a little bit of an emerging metric, the customer effort metric, which some people think will be a better long-time indicator of your satisfaction with the company than your own self-reported satisfaction. So it's important to think about the data that you'll need in order to do ROI analysis so that you arm yourself with that background of data and can begin to tell the stories, some of the stories that we'll illustrate for you here. Okay, so we're going to talk about those three different dimensions: saving, selling, and learning. So sources of savings. Let's talk about the big levers. Typically in enterprise communities, savings come in a support context, a customer support context. And the simple story there is it's much cheaper to have customers supporting customers than it is for you to have an employee supporting a customer. And I gave an illustration just a moment ago. Most companies find it's about 1/10 of the cost or less to actually support a customer through a social channel than it is to support them through traditional channels. Three big levers, and let me just walk through each one of these. Direct deflection. So think about, Justin mentioned, a support community where people are helping each other. Some people are asking questions, some people are answering. Direct deflection, as we define it here, is a situation in which a customer actively asks a question. So the customer logs into the system, asks a question, and somebody answers that question. You can go in the community as the community manager. You can see that question. You can see whether it got an answer or not. You can see whether that's been marked as a solution by that user. So it's very unambiguous. You have a set of questions that have been answered. Now, each of those questions obviously has been answered, but there isn't really a cost savings necessarily there unless those users didn't have to call the call center as a result of this interaction in the community. So in addition to counting the number of solutions you've provided to customers in the community, you also need to understand what percentage of those actually would have ended up in the call center if it hadn't been for the community. So when you combine those two things, you find, looking across our customers, you get the range that you see at the bottom of the page there. Somewhere between 15 and 40% is what we find. So now, and let me just be clear about this because it can be a little bit confusing with deflection. When companies report deflection, when they say, we've got 20% call deflection, we've achieved 20% call deflection in our community, typically what they're talking about is they've deflected 20% of the existing volume of calls coming to their call center. That is not what this range is here. What this range is the percentage of successful interactions, those solutions that customers have said, my problem was solved. The percentage of those that you're generating in your community that actually would have ended up in your call center. So what you need to do as someone running the community is take the number of solutions, take that percentage of those successful interactions in your community, and then compare that to the volumes of calls coming into the call center. That's ultimately what that number is. So I think it's important to be very clear about what those numbers are. You need to get to this number before you can get to that number. But of course, the interactions you see in the community don't represent the total value that's being created in the community, because as I mentioned, a vast majority of the interaction in the community is what we call passive or indirect. People are never asking a question. Very often they're not even registering for the community. They're arriving at the community, they're finding an answer, they're solving their problem, and they're leaving. Right? So, and in fact, in most communities, that's 10 times, 50 times, sometimes even 100 times the number of people who you can actually see getting an answer. And so if you really want to capture the value of what you're creating, you can't just focus on the things that you can see. You can't just focus on the interactions that are in the community. You've got to capture that reuse. That's what we're calling here indirect deflection. In some ways it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not indirect. This is deflection. These are people getting solutions, getting answers to their questions. And again, it's not, you need to look at not just everybody who's getting an answer to their question, but the people who are both getting an answer to their question and not having to call the call center. So if you do as I recommended, you go and collect some examples of surveys that you'll see out there, you'll notice that people ask not one question, but two questions. They ask not just, did you get your question answered? They will also ask, if the community wasn't here, what would your first choice have been to get an answer to your question? Ask a friend, do research, open up a case, or call the call center. So that's how people are getting at this notion of how are we generating savings through this social support channel. There's a last piece here, agent efficiency. So the notion here is, because we're generating this store of knowledge and store of answers, it actually provides a way for agents themselves to learn, to come up to speed, and to provide answers more effectively than they could if they hadn't had this asset available to them. And I'm sure we've all heard the story, and I'll tell you, I've talked to a lot of support organizations, and it's truer than not that when you're calling the call center and you're asking someone a question, at many companies, that agent is going to Google when they're trying to answer your question. So, and very often they're finding a social answer to that. So even when you're not directly using social channels, we're finding social is permeating that way of providing solutions to customers. Let me mention one other thing, because we haven't made this distinction yet. I think maybe Justin alluded to it a little bit. And this is really particularly relevant to agent efficiency. Social support is more than one thing, right? Social support is peer support, as we've been discussing it, customers helping customers. But social support is also direct support, that is, support provided by the company and the company's agents and employees, direct support provided over social channels. So both of those have a benefit, but they're different kinds of benefits. And that's why you see that range so broad there in agent efficiency. That's why you see it 15% to 60%. Because what we're finding is, in terms of the agent efficiency I just talked about, which is the additional efficiency you get from having a better and more current base of knowledge, that tends to be what's driving the lower end of that range. When we talk about the efficiency you get by equipping somebody who's providing social support in a social channel with a platform and a dashboard and a set of tools that allow them to be much more effective than they could be if they were simply trying to provide direct support directly in Twitter or through other less sophisticated means. That's what we're hearing. We're hearing that people say their agents are up to 60% more productive when they have an engagement console that works like Lithium Social Web does. So I think we want to keep both of those in mind. Much of what we're talking about here has to do with the peer support side, but I think, as we all know, that direct support side in social channels that our customers use Lithium Social Web for is increasingly a big piece of what social support means in large enterprises. And we have a couple of examples we'll talk through as well. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Here's a B2B example, Autodesk. This is actually one of the oldest enterprise communities in the world, started back in the late 80s, and one of my favorite examples because few companies are more sophisticated than Autodesk in the way they approach social support. And you'll see here, again, they're reporting a deflection number. Again, this is not the range that we talked about earlier, right? The range we talked about earlier is the percentage of questions in your community that are deflection. This number is the percentage of the total call volume that they get that they were able to reduce. So, I mean, I think ultimately that's the goal of every company, right? They would like to see the direct impact of social on the volumes they're getting to the call center. Very often it is not a net reduction. It may be a reduction in growth of calls to the call center, but one way or another you should expect to see impact of that kind. You'll also notice here, and in each of these examples, we're trying to give you a range of how people are quantifying results. You'll also see the NPS number here. Many of our customers use Net Promoter Score. It's a kind of customer satisfaction score, and of course, it's one of the things that you want to do when you're providing social support as one channel among many support channels is be able to understand how satisfied are people with this channel as compared to other channels as well. Another example is Sky. Sky, as you know, is one of the biggest telecom companies in the UK. Sky has one of the most complete social support programs, I think, in the world. It combines both direct support in social channels and peer support at scale. And you can see some of the results that Sky reports as well. And again, in all of these cases, these are the numbers that the customer themselves reports. These aren't numbers that come from Lithium. These are numbers that come directly from the customer. And so you're seeing that total volume of their or the community members who say that the interactions they've had in social channels prevented them from having to make a call to the call center. You'll see that number there is 25% for Sky. So again, this is comparable, and you notice that in the range. This is comparable to what we see across many companies. It may be different for you, and obviously part of the work that you'll do is to understand what your ranges are for your company, but it's a typical range there. And then you'll see, most of customers who are doing social support are innovating in other areas in support as well, and so you'll see how they tell the story here of the accomplishments that they've got in support more broadly. And then I'll also mention, too, that in some of the resources we have, and particularly in the Lithia Awards on our website, you'll find a sort of a broader story about each of these cases here. So I encourage you to kind of delve into those and get more details there as well. Another example that maybe you've heard about is HP's social support. So in their consumer social support, I think this 40 million number is a little bit dated right now. I was on a panel recently with HP, and they reported that they serve 5 million customers a month in their social support community. So you can well imagine if you're getting a 90% reduction in cost, if everybody who is getting an answer in that community or people who aren't calling the call center, you can imagine the magnitude of savings there. They themselves report a 10 million plus ROI that they're getting from a community on an annual basis. The number on the lower right there, the community handles 20% of customer cases globally. It's interesting. It's one dimension we haven't talked about is even if you count everybody who directly asked a question and got an answer, and you counted everybody who passively visited and got an answer, if you just count the ones that don't call the call center, you're not quite capturing all the value, right? Because you are, even for the ones who never would have called the call center, you are delivering an interaction to those users. You're solving a problem for those users at a cost that's lower than you could have provided in another channel. So I think another thing we're often seeing customers report is to say what percentage of our interactions here, support interactions in total, are actually provided through support channels. Most companies believe that number is going to be growing a lot over time as increasingly customers, particularly young ones, don't want to talk to a person to get their questions answered. They'd like to get them answered just directly themselves. Okay, one example from Time Warner Cable. This is specifically direct support on social channels. So Time Warner Cable has implemented Lithium Social Web, and they have agents providing support in social channels. And here are some of the results that they're reporting. So agents are 57% more productive in social channels with an engagement tool that helps them focus on those opportunities to actually provide answers, those social mentions that are relevant to support, those topics that a support agent is actually knowledgeable about. And the challenge of getting the right question to the right person is something that your tool needs to provide. And the other number there, 30% improvement in social response, I think that's pretty important too. When I talk to companies and I ask them, what percentage of questions are you actually getting to out there on the web? It's usually a relatively small percentage today. Of the ones they're getting to, they're usually reporting a response time that's pretty good. But I know most companies are frustrated by the fact that there's still a lot of questions and a lot of customers who need help that they're just not able to reach through the tools that have existed up to now. So, I mean, that's really what's been fantastic about Lithium Social Web. It's kind of given companies the opportunity to add that level of discipline to social support they just haven't been able to add before. So that's the savings side of this. But let's talk a little bit about the sales side. 10 years ago when I started working on this stuff, I was working with a telecom, and they thought when they launched the community that really this was going to be all about cost reduction. And then they discovered when the community was live for about a year, they said, well, we're noticing something different. We're noticing that people who are involved in social channels don't look like our other customers. They don't look like them in terms of how long they remain customers. They remain customers longer. They're buying more. They tend to use more of our product. And it was a little bit eye-opening, I think, at the time, because none of us really knew, I think, what the impact of this was. And since then, it's been kind of interesting for me to see that it's true in almost every case where companies measure this. They find that customers that they're engaging in social channels are showing those same differences. Now, illustrate that with a couple of examples here. But before I do that, let's kind of talk about, again, just as we did with savings, let's talk about what some of the main levers are there. So, increased spend. One of the things we find is that customers who participate in social channels spend more than customers that don't participate in social channels. And you might say, now wait a minute, maybe the customers who participate in social channels are just better customers anyway, right? Maybe they're more loyal. We always hear about your social customer being more loyal, right? Maybe we've got a chicken and the egg thing here, right? Maybe we're not making them more loyal. Maybe we're just attracting the ones that are more loyal. Customers who are doing this well are measuring not just the difference between social and non-social customers, which you should do. Obviously, that's part of it. They're also measuring individual customers over time. So they're measuring it longitudinally, right? They're measuring a customer before they engage in social channels. And what did that customer's profile look like? And then what does that customer look like after they've engaged in social channels or have adopted social channels as part of the way that they work? Generally, what we're seeing is that the impact of that range is somewhere between 20 and 40%, the difference between what a customer spends if a customer engages in social channels versus a typical customer who might not be engaged. So that's one piece. We have a lot of commerce customers, e-commerce customers. Obviously, they can measure that directly, right? If you're doing transactions on your site, that's the kind of analysis you want to do. And we'll have a couple of examples of that coming up. A churn reduction, and I measured this in connection with the telecom that I mentioned a moment ago. Customers who engage in social channels remain customers longer in general. And, for many industries, particularly industries where customers subscribe over time, telecom obviously is one of them. Spotify is another one of our customers, right? Skype is another one of our customers. So companies where, they can measure in real time the retention of customers, and churn is obviously a big concern there. Social is a tool for reducing churn. What we're seeing on average as we look across the customers that we have for whom churn is a focus is that the range of impact on churn is somewhere between 25 and 50%. But let me just be very specific about this here. This is not a 25 to 50% reduction in your total annual churn. Obviously, that would be a massive number. It would be fantastic if that were the number. But just I want to make sure you're clear on how companies are thinking about this and quantifying this. This is a reduction in the likelihood to churn of the individual user who's engaged, right? So if this user has a 10% chance on average, if your customers have a 10% chance on average of churning, and you cut that average in half because you've engaged them in social channels, and you reduce that to a 5% likelihood to churn, that's where your ROI comes from. So just want to make sure you understand what that number represents. Finally, an increase in traffic, and this is the top of the funnel, right? So if you're generating revenue, if you're generating sales, the first thing you need to do is actually attract customers. And I think this was a little bit of a surprise for some customers as well when they realized that because search engines index social content so much more aggressively than they index other sources of content, that when you have a community on your website of any kind, it becomes an engine for generating traffic to your website. I did an analysis not long ago, and it varies a lot by type of company. Very, very popular consumer electronics brands, on their website, they may have 70% of their traffic coming to the social elements of their website. A typical consumer company might have 10 or 20% of their traffic. So there's a lot of variation here, and it's maybe a starting point is to understand for yourself if you've got a community initiative, what percentage of my traffic today that comes to my domain actually comes to my community. And the improvement that we typically see, improvement of traffic to the domain from implementing a community on the website, is somewhere between 5 and 30%. But again, as I mentioned, those large ranges of impact, it's going to depend a lot on your industry. It can be significantly more than this. I wouldn't expect that it would be significantly less than the bottom of this range. I think that's something that I think you can expect regardless. But let's turn to some very specific examples. Sephora, cosmetics. You'll see on the lower left-hand side, they did the analysis that I described, right? They did an analysis of social versus non-social customers, people who use the Beauty Talk community versus people who don't use the Beauty Talk community. And then they did one more thing. They said, why don't we compare the people who are the most active members of the Beauty Talk community? And those are the numbers you see on the lower left-hand side of this slide here. And what they find is their super fans, those most active members, spend 10 times what a typical member does, and then the typical member spends 2.5 times what folks who aren't members of the Beauty Talk community. What's interesting to me about this, and maybe it's cosmetics because that's something you have to buy continuously over time, and different kinds of products obviously have different dynamics in that respect. But I've seen a lot of examples in which the impact on the typical member is actually higher than the impact on the enthusiast or the super fan. And what's interesting to me about that is the number of people who are typical members obviously is much larger than super fans. And so if that relationship exists, then obviously you're generating that much more value in terms of the revenue that you're generating in the community. But I think everybody who is generating transactions on the website, if you have social, if you have a community on the website, you need to know these numbers, right? And this is part of the story you should be telling about your community as well. Another completely different example is American Diabetes Association, and this kind of brings out another nuance of this that I think many people who sell products, many companies who sell products are thinking increasingly about. This is not just about getting your customers to buy more or even remain customers longer. This is about getting your customers deeper into your product or your experience, right? So most of us know that in this example with the American Diabetes, people might be members of the American Diabetes Association, but they may never take an action like calling a congressman or volunteering at a center. Much in the same way that I might buy a smartphone and I might use 2 features of that smartphone instead of the 50 things that it does. The concept here, some people call depth of use, other people call consumption of value. The notion is if people engage more deeply with your product and with your organization, they're more satisfied, they derive more value, and they remain customers longer, and they generate more value for you. That's the notion. So I think the companies that are the most sophisticated in thinking about this are trying to quantify that as well and telling that story about their community. Another example I really like here is Future Shop. They take a basket size approach. So Future Shop is an electronics retailer, and the notion is a typical social customer, when they check out, has a basket size that's 25% larger than someone who isn't a social customer. Completely another equally valid way to think about this. Another example I really like is Barclaycard, and I like it in part because it's in financial services, and we don't see enough examples, I think, in financial services. They're beginning to emerge today, but Barclaycard's a great one. Barclaycard has what they're calling a social card. The social experience is very much part of having this card. And the notion is if you're engaged socially around this card, that in some ways it's the same dynamic that we see in credit unions, right? People are much more likely to pay on time. They're much more likely to use their credit responsibly when they're part of a community of people who are using this product. And that's exactly what Barclaycard is seeing. They're seeing, customer retention is improving, and they're seeing that, customer complaints are reducing as well. And they're quantifying that benefit to the company because obviously there's a dollar value in terms of complaints and there's a dollar value in terms of delinquencies and other aspects of credit card use. So I love the Barclaycard example, and I think there's a great case on that on the website as well. Redfin, again, another example of the ways people think about this. The questions they're asking is, are the people who are engaged in social on our website, are they actually transacting? So, don't just think about volume and transaction. Don't just think of frequency. Think about, are they actually converting at a higher rate than other folks as well? And then finally, last example here, again, this is another depth of use example, and I really love this, because people become better educated about in these social channels, you get the opportunity to teach them about products, and they end up taking more advantage of the products that you offer them. So just some metrics on Skype as well. The last section we'll talk about, which is knowledge or learning, I'll go very quickly. In some ways it's sort of an emerging area, and in some ways it's a little bit harder to quantify, but I didn't want to finish this conversation without giving you some of the examples that I think are kind of inspiring to me about this. Obviously in social you're creating knowledge, right? So every interaction is creating a piece of knowledge that's reusable. You can take that knowledge and actually create more persistent assets. Our customers use our tribal knowledge base to do that. And when you do that, you're actually replacing some of the time and effort you might spend in writing knowledge articles. What our customers tell us is there's a range typically of somewhere between $500 and $1,000 per article in terms of the effort that's saved by either creating an article out of customer content entirely or just using a piece of customer content or series of customer conversations on the website as the material. You might still have someone drafting this article, but they're not starting from scratch, right? They've got all the information there, and they simply need to assemble it in that form. So I think thinking about the value of this, not just in the individual interactions and deflections that come from that, but from creating assets that otherwise would cost you money to develop is important. Second, early issue identification, right? What is the value of being able to identify a problem with the product weeks before we might learn about that problem in the call center? Because that's what customers tell us. Social channel is absolutely the fastest channel for finding out what's going on with your products and what's going on with your customers. I often say people will wonder before they will complain. They'll think it's their fault. They'll wonder aloud, is anybody else seeing this? All that might happen hours and days and weeks before they actually get on the phone to you and start complaining about your product. You see that in social channels. And some companies are beginning to quantify the value, right? If we can identify early on that this software product, that this product has an issue, we might be able to release a firmware update that then eliminates a potential 1,000 or 10,000 calls to the call center we would have gotten if we hadn't fixed it. And then finally, ideation and innovation, right? Asking customers to contribute their best ideas. What is the value of an idea from a customer that then becomes a best-selling product? That's why it ranges widely, right? Because the value of that can be in the millions of dollars. So I think we don't want to forget when we get really fixated on the savings and really fixated on the sales that there's this whole other piece of knowledge and learning that can be pretty valuable as well. And just a couple quick examples, and then we'll go to Q&A here. One of the examples I really like in terms of knowledge is National Instruments. Another B2B example, they've done ideation for a long time. This just gives you an idea of the volume of ideas they get from customers. And then again, customers are helping them refine these ideas, and they end up in the products that then come back to the customers as well. On the consumer side, Verizon. I mean, this is an example you can see live today. Go to Verizon and you'll see the ideas that customers are proposing to Verizon for including in products. 85%. There are some of the results that they're getting in terms of the customer suggestions that end up in products. So, world's fastest tour of some of these levers, but I think looking at real examples, and again, I encourage you to kind of go to our website and find those examples there. Lots of them are documented, both in the Lithia Awards and the Lithium Success book are probably the two best places to start. So let's go to Q&A. I know we've got some questions that have come in here. Justin and I are both going to chime in on these questions, and I know this is a topic that many people have questions about. So one of the questions that we got is HP's 10 million ROI savings per month or per year? That's an easy one.
Yeah, so it's an easy one, so I'll go ahead and take that. And actually, the number on that slide is much lower than the stated truth. Actually, HP won a Forrester Groundswell Award in 2012, and in their submission, which you can find online and you can search for this, they claim a $50 million annual savings using lithium. And earlier in the presentation, there was we covered Autodesk. It may have been a little difficult to see on the slide. They reported in a Gartner case study that was published in 2012 that they're getting a 6.8 million annual cost savings from this as well. I will say that when we work with our customers and we go through a process of working on building a business case with them and using that in the process of securing investment or growing investment over time as brands spend time with us year after year. Often we are showing much higher ROIs than even that, but at some point it becomes enough to be able to justify, and it's easy to take even just some portion of the dimensions of value that we went through today and be able to more than cost justify the investment in not just the software, but really also the staffing and the full program around this as well. I've seen examples of customers getting full payback in just a few months time period, and Joe likely can speak to that as well. So hopefully that helps give you a better sense. Even some of these big numbers as they're out there, in some cases that's just what brands are even comfortable saying, and may even know that the numbers in truth are much bigger than that, but it's enough just to get people behind the initiative, putting out the numbers that they're willing to state publicly.
Sounds good. Thanks, Justin. We got another question here. What are some common mistakes that people make in putting together an ROI assessment? It's interesting to me. One of the most common mistakes I see is they don't refer back to the goals and objectives of the organization in creating this community. It isn't enough to simply quantify some value someplace. I think you need to think about what is the value to this community, to this organization. I do think it's important to cast your net broadly, right? You might want to tell a lot of stories about the value it creates, but I do think we want to go back to goals and objectives, and we want to go back to, why we created this, because very often the way we created and the way we articulated the business proposition for this community when we created it will relate directly to the way we think about value in this business. Years ago at Cisco, John Chambers, you were in John Chambers' organization, and he would say, I know the impact of customer satisfaction on revenue. So you don't have to tell me what the revenue is. If you show me you move customer satisfaction, we'll bring it to dollars, right? So if you're in an organization like that, it's important to understand that, right? It's important to understand how to frame and present that information inside your organization. Likewise, with some of the examples that we just talked about, like for example with early issue identification, you might say, well, we could never quantify what the value would be of knowing 3 weeks in advance about a defect and to be able to fix it. There are some organizations who have an entire process for quantifying that, as Six Sigma manufacturers, for example. So think about the processes that already exist in your organization for quantifying value like this. And to the extent that you can report value in the language and with the numbers that your company uses to quantify value, that's important. The extent to which we approach social as sort of a kind of a separate channel that's different than all the rest of the channels, and here's kind of what we could come up with. I think that tends to be less, I think, successful over time.
Great, and I'll take one more question here, which is, are there some simple ways to create just a back-of-the-envelope estimate of ROI? And we walked through a good number of drivers that you can use to build into your models. If you're looking for something super simple on the social support side, today we showed you several examples of companies getting 20%, 25% call deflection. So take 20% of your calls today that are related to customer service and take your average cost per call, multiply those together, and that'll give you a pretty good, just sort of rough back of the envelope for what might be possible. More on the revenue side, if you take your website traffic today and you imagine adding 10% more to that and having that traffic convert maybe 25% better, that'll give you a sense of how much revenue you might be able to drive. And also if you think about just taking your churn rate today, knocking that back 15%, for the percentage of customers that you can engage through your social channels, then that'll give you some sense of things as well.
Well, one of the things we find, you're reminding me, Justin, is reporting numbers, even if they're estimates on your side, will get the conversation going, right? And so if somebody challenges a number, you can challenge them back and say, help me refine. If that is not the right number, work together with me to refine that number. What we also find is when you begin reporting numbers, you've already established that the answer isn't zero, right? So it's progress simply putting numbers on the table, right?
Great. Let me move ahead now to our last concluding slides here. I want to make sure that all of you know that we have our annual user conference coming up. This is April 23rd to the 25th in San Francisco. And for those of you who are Lithium customers on today's call or are serious about becoming Lithium customers in the near future, we will be sending you via email a discount offer to be able to attend Link at a reduced price this year. So that's a special thank you for you investing your time and attention in today's webinar. All right. Well, I think that takes us to the end of things. And Bonnie, do you want to take us home?
Sure do. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Excellent Q&A session. A lot of questions about the deck being available. Yes, you can download it right now from the resources icon at the bottom of your screen. This webcast will also be available on demand within a few hours. So if you joined us late or didn't take good enough notes, you can review that at the same URL that you used to join us here today. Thanks a lot. We're closing it out.